Good afternoon, folks. The real Captain Kirk here, live from Weather Trends 360 studio here in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. A lot to cover again this week. Last week here, if you thought it was cold and snowy in the eastern two-thirds of the country, you are correct. It was actually for the eastern two-thirds, again, about the coldest and snowiest since 1997. We had two snowstorms traverse the south-central U.S. into the east. But for the U.S. overall, last week was the third wettest in 30 years, fourth snowiest in 30 years, and fourth coldest in 30 years. So pretty extreme for mid-November, to say the least. If we look at here at the snowfall for the first storm, we actually had record early snow in Houston and parts of Louisiana. They actually did officially report accumulating snowfall in Houston, in and around Louisiana. So again, make it record-shattering. The second phase of this storm last week was as it later in the week actually hit the Northeast as obviously a pretty sizable nor'easter type event. That made it the first or second biggest November snowstorm in 150 years for many spots. New York City, as an example, had 6.4 inches, making it the second biggest November snowstorm in 150 years of records. Their biggest was 9 inches back in 1882, but again, that occurred about 2 weeks later, 30 November. So a historic snowstorm, to say the least. We had about 9 inches here at outside Weather Trends 360 studios. Looking at season-to-date snowfall, again, pretty epic. To see this much snow this early in the season is just, again, kind of off the charts. And again, it's a bellwether of things to come, as we've been hinting at for many months now, that this would be the coldest, snowiest winter in 5 years, and we're certainly living up to that, even though it's still fall here. If we look at the snowfall here the next 6 days, we see a little bit of lingering snow in the interior New England. We have another system tonight and tomorrow bring lighter snows, but mostly well inland of the big cities. No surprises here probably with this storm. In fact, no surprises with this storm. So it'll be more of an interior event away from the big cities. Then not too much as we get toward Thanksgiving Day. And then later in the week, we actually see a system coming out of the Rockies into the plains. So again, still very much winter-like across the country. Looking at flu, normally the cold and snow is not an early onset, can actually lead to kind of the early onset of flu. If you think about it, we all get hunkered indoors sooner, and then we tend to spread the viruses around much quicker. The good news is we had 9 states with a widespread outbreak last year. This year, only 3 states. So that's good news going into the Thanksgiving holiday. Not as many people are sick, and then we're all going to be really in close confines here, obviously, later this week. This is actually good news that we're not going to have a massive widespread outbreak right after Thanksgiving like we had last year, where the flu just went absolutely crazy with nearly every state in the country and widespread by December. So slower start. Let's hope that pans out. Australia had a epic season like we did a couple of winters ago, and this year they actually had the least in 5 years. So they're usually a bellwether for us. Let's hope that's the case. Looking here at this week overall for the U.S., we see that it's the wettest in 4 years, snowiest in 3 years, and coldest in 5 years. So again, pretty much the same general pattern. The good news here is there'll be a lot of Thanksgiving out in California because they're going to get a good 1, 3, 4, 5 inches of rain. So these fires in California are very likely to be squelched by this amount of rainfall. Not a lot of snow with this because it's a high elevation, snow levels. So, but the rainfall is certainly a huge plus for California. We were actually just out there, and we'll show some pictures here at the end. Looking actually at Thanksgiving morning, the coldest spot Thanksgiving morning is going to feel downright winter-like in the Northeast with single digits, even some below zeros for New England, teens in and around the big cities from Philly to New York. So very cold in the Northeast, coldest Thanksgiving in 13 some years. Rest of the country, again, frosty, but not too terrible. So Northeast is the cold spot. The good news is Thanksgiving Day actually looks to be pretty dry for most of us, maybe somewhat weather down in Texas, but the big rains obviously out in California. Some high elevation snow possible. So again, good news to squelch those fires out in California. Looking ahead to next week, again, pretty much almost more of the same. So little wetter than last year. Very wet again on the West Coast. Again, more rain for California going into next week, so that's a good thing. Again, big storms, a couple big storm potentials in the Northeast. Some of this precip will be snow. So again, 3, 4, 5 inches of liquid equivalent. Certainly it doesn't bode well if you calculate that into snow. For the Northeast, but wetter than last year, snowiest in 4 years for the U.S. overall, coldest in 22 years for this last part of November going into December. So the cold and snowy pattern is definitely going to continue here, and it could get really, really cold here with a MJO cycle type pattern going into early December. So get used to it. The cold and snow looks like it's here to stay. We were actually out at a big Ag 4.0 conference in San Francisco, just about a mile south of the airport, and it was about as thick of wildfire smoke, as you can imagine. A lot of folks wearing face masks, so it was very, very hard to breathe. Anyone with any kind of ailment whatsoever, asthma, was certainly not nice weather in San Francisco. We do actually put out a video here of our cross Pacific to the Atlantic journey on the flight here, going from extremely smoky in California. There were a few fires even in Utah. Passed over those, went over the Colorado Rockies, and then made it into the New York City metro area. So again, if you want to watch that on YouTube, it was we took 5 hours into 5 minutes, so you can see our trek across the country here in just about 5 minutes. It was good to actually see blue sky, even though we had to come back to the frigid cold and 9 inches of snow in the east here. The little one was certainly happy about the record-shattering snow. And again, for many of us, this was the earliest, biggest November snowstorm in about 150 years since records started. So it's either a top 1 or 2 or 3 for most of us. So with that, folks, we'll leave you with our Thanksgiving message, and have a great week. We'll be here this time next week.